is devoted entirely to our voter service activity. We are greatly appreciative for the participation of our co-sponsors, the Palo Alto Weekly, the Community Media Center, PAGE, Palo Altans for Government Effectiveness, the Palo Alto Chamber of Commerce, the Palo Alto branch of the AAUW, American Association of University Women, and the PTA. In addition, we're especially happy to have the assistance from young people who have participated in the League's New Voices for Youth project. And finally, we recommend that you visit www.smartvoter.org for more information on the candidates and the election. Now, I would like to introduce Sigrid Pinsky, our moderator for tonight's forum. Sigrid is past president of the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto and has been a moderator many times over. Sigrid.
Thank you, Veronica. Welcome, everyone. Our forum this evening provides an opportunity for you to hear from and ask questions of candidates running for Palo Alto City Council. Let me review the logistics for this evening. As I pose questions to the candidates tonight, we have a timekeeper, Doris, who will signal candidates with a yellow sign for 30 seconds left and a red sign that means stop. I ask each candidate to please adhere to these guidelines. I take them very seriously as we want to allow each candidate adequate time. I will enforce these time limits. Question collectors, would you wave, please, so the candidates and audience can see you? We'll circulate through the audience to collect written questions. All questions to candidates from the audience must be written on the cards we have provided. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Please address your question to a particular candidate or state that you would like all candidates to answer your question. We have question screeners from the League and our co-sponsors who will organize and review these questions before submission to the moderator. One request of our audience, please do not applaud or clap or otherwise demonstrate your feelings throughout this evening. We're trying to provide as much information as we can, and your outbursts, heartfelt though they might be, will only detract from that effort. Candidates, I wanted to also mention to you, if you'd like to get up and stretch while you're off camera, you may do so. The format for this evening will be as follows. We'll go from opening statements first. Each candidate will have 2 minutes, and these will be in order of random drawing that was done before this forum. Then we'll go to questions from the audience, and each candidate will have 1 minute to answer those questions. Then we'll move to closing statements, and each candidate will have 1.5 minutes for closing statements. This will be in the reverse order from the opening statements. Now I'd like to introduce the candidates. Audience, please hold your applause until all the candidates have been introduced. We have Danielle Martell, Jack Morton, Roger Smith, John Barton, Norman Carroll, Peter Dreckmeyer, Victor Frost, Karen Holman, Skip Justman, Yuriko Kishimoto, and Larry Klein. Now you can applaud. We will now go to opening statements, and Ms. Martell, you are first.
Thank you. My family settled in the San Francisco Bay Area over 150 years ago, and I settled in Palo Alto over 30 years ago. I'm a native. For many years, people have called me Miss Palo Alto because my birthday is the same day as Palo Alto's anniversary day. This is my home, and I care about it deeply. And for as long as I can remember, our police department has always been a source of community pride, not a source of embarrassment like it is today. Under our current police chief, Miss Lynn Johnson, our police department has become militant, deceptive, and secretive. Was there nepotism involved in hiring Miss Johnson? What is the relationship history between Miss Lynn Johnson and our assistant city manager, Miss Emily Harrison?
Thank you. Mr. Klein. Oh, I'm sorry.
Does their relationship constitute interest has cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars in lawsuits because she consistently breaks our constitutional rights. She fosters and protects bad cops. I will work hard to restore Palo Alto to the free, safe, proud community in which I have spent most of my life. Miss Palo Alto says no to Miss Lynn and Miss Emily, and no to our city manager, Frank the Nest. Thank you.
Thank you. As I've asked the audience, please do not clap. I also want to remind the audience to please turn off your cell phones. I think we heard one a minute ago. Mr. Klein, you're next.
Thank you. Let me introduce myself. I've lived in Palo Alto since 1967. My sons grew up here. They went to Palo Alto schools K through 12, both of them graduating from Pali. In 1972, I joined with 8 other people to become one of the co-founders of the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District, which today has fulfilled our vision by having more than 50,000 acres in open space. I next served on the City Council from 1981 to 1989. A highlight of my service on the council was the passage of the utility tax in 1987. I was the author and principal sponsor of that legislation. Pursuant to that, our city and our school district were able to enter into an agreement pursuant to which Cubberley was saved as a community resource and all of the school playing fields were retained as a community resource. In exchange, the school district receives more than almost $7 million a year now from that. I'm very proud of that achievement. After I left the council in 1989, I remained active in our community in a variety of ways, serving on the boards of Avenidas, the Palo Alto Community Child Care, excuse me, and the Palo Alto Recreation Foundation. In 1992, I was asked by the then City Council to serve as chair and, in effect, the chief executive officer of our Centennial program, which turned out, I think, to be a remarkable success. We had nearly 100 events, and we raised almost $600,000. I was also active in our storm drains program, which passed this spring. I'm running this year because I'm concerned about the state of our city. I think it's becoming somewhat frayed around the edges. I think I have the background, the proven track record, and the experience to make a difference, to reverse that trend and make our special, special city a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, you're next.
I'm Roger Smith. My wife and I have lived in Palo Alto for 40 years. I have 4 children that all went through the public schools, Duvenik, Jordan, and Pali. I have 3 grandchildren. I have a 92-year-old mother who I care for, who was a public school teacher for 44 years. I've been active in the community. I've been on the board of the Tech Museum, the Community Foundation of Silicon Valley, the Rotary Club, the JCs, the Boy Scouts, and the YMCA. I've been involved with the city on 3 fronts. I'm heading up the group to finalize the purchase of the Bressler property in our wonderful Rastadero Preserve. I'm on the mayor's Retail Attraction and Retention Committee. I am a co-founder of the Palo Alto, Friends of the Palo Alto Parks. The city of Palo Alto is a big business with a $120 million budget and 1,100 employees. I come out of the financial service industry. I was vice president and manager of the El Camino in California office of Wells Fargo. Many of you were clients of mine at that bank. I also am the founder of Silicon Valley Bank and the CEO and president. The financial service business is much like the city. You're in a service business. I feel I have the leadership qualities, the experience, and the ability to make tough decisions as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barton, you're next.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is John Barton, and before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors, the League and the PTA and the Chamber and all the other groups who've come together to put this together. And I'd also like to thank my fellow candidates for being here this evening. It's a great public service for them to be here, as well as for the Media Center to put this event on. For the last 8 years, I've had the honor and privilege of serving this community as an elected member of the school board. During that time, I think we've been very successful. My colleagues and I have built a sound reserve policy, opened 2 schools, fought back the governor's attempt to take $20 million of our local property tax funds, completed our bond program on time and ahead of budget, built strong statewide lauded student performance goals. In short, we had a track record of success and we had a track record of timely decisions. Parallel to my work on the school board, I've also had the pleasure to be a founding member of the Community Working Group, which is building the Opportunity Center, the homeless center, and 89 units of housing on Encina Avenue. I've also served as the president of the Palo Alto Chamber of Commerce, or rather the chair of the Palo Alto Chamber of Commerce, and the president of the Redwood City Child Development Center, as well as performed my duties as a member of the Palo Alto Child Care Advisory Committee. In each of those areas, I think I've brought a sense of vision, a sense of focus, and a sense of fiscal support and responsibility to that work. And I think that's important because, like others, I'm running because I have concerns as well as a deep love for this community. I think we need to focus on a clear, shared vision, and I expect our leaders to lead us to that. I think we need to focus on building affordable housing so that those who live, those who work in our community can afford to live here. And I think we need to build a clearer fiscal model that looks at autonomous sources of funds. I look forward to answering the questions tonight, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Mr. Justman, you're next.
Palo Alto needs a sustainable budget. There are those who say that we need to cut services. I disagree. There are those who say we need to increase city fees and taxes. I disagree. We can preserve the services we cherish with the revenues we have. We need to change our service model. Currently, we provide services with paid city employees. And because of rising benefit costs associated with these employees, this service model is very expensive. There are other service models that are presently in use in our community that we need to implement for city services. We all enjoy the services provided by our nonprofit groups here in Palo Alto, such as Avenidas and La Comida and others. These nonprofits create an effective and efficient and economical way to provide services that enable us to have a level of service that is going to sustain our budget. I propose that we need to have public nonprofit partnerships, service partnerships, in order to continue the services that we cherish. And these service partnerships can be funded in part by the city grants and then funded also by the monies that nonprofits are able to attract. Our nonprofits are able to attract significant donations that enable our services to continue to be provided at a high level. If we change our service model and take steps to partner with nonprofits, we can continue the Junior Museum and the Children's Library and the branch libraries with services that are provided in part by city staff and magnified by volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Frost, you're next.
Thank you. First, to the people that know me out there in TV land, hello. Palo Alto is my hometown. One of my core issues is disaster relief. We need a disaster relief center here in Palo Alto. All right, a poem. Dark days of 55. The dark days of 55 flood I'll never forget. The street lights went out. Stay inside. Stay inside, they said. Cops' sirens lingered in the night air. Why is there water everywhere? The lightning and thunder shook the windows and doors. When will the rain stop? The howl of the wind I can hear. When will the rain stop? To this day, I remember the dark days of 55. Are we ready for more dark days in Palo Alto? No. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kishimoto, you're next.
Thank you. My name is Yoriko Kishimoto. Thank you for the trust you put in me 4 years ago. I am asking for your support on November 8th so I can continue to serve you for 4 more years. I want to make a case to you that I am the best qualified candidate to help Palo Alto meet the challenges of its future without sacrificing our environmental or community values. It would be easy if Palo Alto did not face changes, but the fact is Palo Alto changes every day. It is also far too easy to change or grow without taking full responsibility for the consequences and doing the hard work it takes to make sure that every change is a positive change for Palo Alto. We cannot afford to keep reducing services, to reduce our spending on infrastructure, to create more congestion on our streets, or to reduce open space. Every day I put to use my Stanford MBA skills for you. I draw upon my 10 plus years of experience as a neighborhood and environmental leader. I use my people skills to do my analysis, build coalitions, to build creative solutions for Palo Alto. I stand for walkable neighborhoods, the highest environmental standards, an open and accountable government, and fiscal responsibility. I am very proud and I'm honored that I am supported by all the members of the City Council who are not running this time. I hope that conveys to you that I am a strong city leader who is an independent thinker, but can work effectively on the elected council to work on tough issues so that we can move forward as a community.
Thank you. Ms. Holman, you're next.
Good evening. George Bernard Shaw once said, "Some people see things as they are and say why. I see things that never were and say why not." When I first heard that quote as a young woman, I was so impressed that I adopted a never say never approach to life. And it's a good thing because I never would have supposed this. But due to the support and encouragement of many of you, I sit here tonight as a candidate for Palo Alto City Council. It's very difficult to focus on just a few issues in the community, but tonight I would just like to briefly focus on 3. Council leadership, and meaning that council is setting policy for staff to implement to the benefit of the public. Our retail health, our economic health, meaning that I think we need to do more to retain our existing retail and to be more proactive and creative in attracting more retail to Palo Alto. And third is our quality of life, which includes the environment and our community services such as libraries and parks, the things that make Palo Alto very special. To address these issues, I offer the experience as follows. My 4 years experience, which I think is key on the Planning and Transportation Commission. My job as co-chair of the South of Forest Avenue Working Group, and my role as the project director of bringing the Palo Alto History Museum to the Roth Building. I hope that we'll be able to go into more detail of these items later, but for the time being, I'd like to thank the League for making this forum possible.
Thank you. Mr. Morton.
Good evening, everyone. When I moved here 35 years ago as a transplant from Canada, I married into a second-generation Palo Alto family. One of my first activities here was to work against a overpass at Middlefield and Oregon, which in effect would have ruptured our community. I've spent my time being a community activist, and when I was asked to run for council 4 years ago, what I had behind me was work on the school district to prevent school closures and the sale and close of Jordan, and the preservation of the Winter Lodge, which for me as a Canadian, ice is a wonderful thing, but outdoor ice skating rink in California is something so special we should not have bulldozed it and replaced it with high-density housing. That is my passion. My passion is community activities because it is community activities that give us the flavor of our place and give us the sense of who we are. When I ran last time 4 years ago, I did so on a program of fiscal caution, but with the provision that there is no point coming just simply to a balanced budget. In each of the 4 years, in spite of the candidates who this year think that we are in some ways not responsible as a governmental entity. Each of the last 4 years, we've had balanced budgets, but we've not only had balanced budgets, we've had balanced budgets which have tried to preserve all those things which Palo Altans value most. In the last 4 years, we've added more parks and open space than any time since we acquired Foothill or regained the Baylands. I'm very proud to stand up for things like wing spread, for the libraries, and for the community that most of us value so much. And I hope you'll support me again for a second-year term. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dreckmeyer.
Good evening. I'm Peter Dreckmeyer. I was born and raised in Palo Alto, attended public schools here. I think Palo Alto really shaped who I became, and I owe a lot to this community, which is one of the reasons I'm running for city council. I went to school at UC Berkeley, graduated with a degree in political science, and returned to Palo Alto in 1989 to work on the International Earth Day 1990 campaign. I've always seen Palo Alto as a leader on issues such as the environment, and coming back here to work on Earth Day was a great way to reinforce that. Working on Earth Day 1990, I helped lead the movement for a modern American recycling movement, sharing the leadership that we had here in Palo Alto with other communities. On Earth Day, worked with others to co-found Bay Area Action, which is now Actera, working to protect our quality of life here and improve the environment. I have founded some other organizations, including Stanford Open Space Alliance and Environmentalists Against War. I want to bring these leadership skills to the city of Palo Alto. I have worked on the Devil Slide Tunnel campaign. We protect the San Mateo County coast from a large freeway bypass. I have worked on Propositions 12 and 13 as statewide coordinator. We secured $4 billion for parks and clean water projects in California. And I was the executive director of Earth Day Network, oversaw a $4 million annual budget. I want to bring these skills to the city of Palo Alto. If I am elected, I will work on the 3 E's of sustainability. That's environment, economy, and equity. I think that we need to take advantage of opportunities to reduce city spending, unnecessary spending. I think my management experience with nonprofits will help with that. We need to revitalize local retail centers. We need to improve our environmental track record even more. I'd like to see Palo Alto be a leader in energy efficiency and renewable energy. That'll save money and reduce our impact on the local and global environment. And we need to look out for those who are at less advantaged than we are. So I hope you'll choose to vote for me on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carroll.
Hello, excuse me. My name is Norman Carroll. It's a name that some of you have probably heard, and the reaction I usually get when people hear my name and see my face go, "Oh, you're him." I've been involved, along with John Barton, in the Opportunity Center project. I've been involved with other areas that help the unhoused population. I refer to them as unhoused because Palo Alto is their home. They just don't live inside. I changed my status back in December through a project that I was involved with for over 3 years called Off the Streets. I'm a founder of the Downtown Streets team, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. There was a political cartoon. Thank you very much for Palo Alto Daily for advertising us. Part of my public service has been being asked to sit on county task force on unhoused issues. Those are all things that are kind of percolating along at the moment, waiting for funding or other government action. And as such, I have time to give to the community to help in other ways. I've had a lot of people ask me, would you want to run for city council? They like the way I think. They respect me. I've earned, because of the fact I keep track of what's going on in the community, their respect on my opinions. 3 years ago, I was the only one that asked the question of the city and the Chamber of Commerce, are they going to keep working on that parking garage during the Art and Wine Festival? Nobody knew, and nobody thought to ask except me. So I am somebody who keeps track of what goes on in the community. I'm not intimidated by big numbers, but I want to know why they're so big. I'm not intimidated by bureaucracy. I have questioned it to an extensive degree that has cost me a job on an occasion or two. I think that my credibility comes from my self-respect and my integrity, which are two things that the only way I lose them is if I give them away. And credibility is not tied to dollar signs, as some people may think. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, before we move to the audience questions, I would like to ask all candidates to refrain from making allegations regarding personal relationships or personalities during this forum. Thank you. I'm going to begin with a question for all of you. It has to do with housing. While the rental housing market has cooled off considerably over the past 3 to 4 years, there is still a need for affordable rental housing for moderate income families. What solutions do you support to address the affordable housing shortage in the area, and how do you see these solutions being paid for? I'm going to start with Mr. Smith.
The affordable housing is really key to our community because we have a job imbalance here in our city. And one of the things that disturbed me with the closing of the Hyatt is the number 22 bus, where many of those workers could come on the bus, not creating more traffic. We must work closely with all the organizations that we have, making land available to these organizations to make sure we have the proper rental market. The housing rental market is very interesting. One can live in a house in Palo Alto probably at about 50% of what it would cost to own a house. But real affordable housing, primarily in the apartments area, is something that is very much needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Holman, you're next.
I have proposed to city staff and as a part of the Planning Commission that we put overlays, in other words, allow by zoning a process by which affordable housing could be built without going through arduous application process. This would make it more predictable for the neighborhood and for the developer in a more streamlined, efficient, and thus less costly process. I think this predictability would make this move forward much more quickly, and funding is a challenge right now, quite frankly. There are still some grants available, but it is a challenge, and I think it is a challenge, though. I think also it's important that we retain our current existing, more affordable housing, meaning our existing cottage courts and that type of development that we do have in the community that's already integrated into our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to go to Mr. Morton.
As a former auditor for the Palo Alto Housing Corporation, I've always been impressed with the fact that they have 12 projects in our community, and most of us could not identify where they are. We have a model of success for low-income and supported housing. The most recent project that they brought online is the Oak Court, which is in what has now become the hotspot of Palo Alto next to the Somerville Homes. It blends in. You can hardly tell that it is housing for people of moderate rent. And when the Opportunity Center comes online, we will be able to house others. I think the final project that we'll bring online next, with the next council, will be the Alma substation, which the city is proposing to move the substation to Quarry Road and turn the land on Alma into affordable housing project.
Thank you. Mr. Frost, you're next.
Thank you. All right, we're getting into an area here. The Opportunity Center does not have any free beds. We must do a thing called transitional housing, like in St. Paul. We need 250 free beds, then we go from there. We have to get some things straightened out in our community with the nonprofits. Transitional housing is the answer. It's working. That's what we have to do here. I'm tired of the corruption and the greed and the bigots. It has to come to an end. We have to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martell, you're next.
I'm not sure how to solve the issue of affordable housing. It's something that I need to look into more, but I would like to say that I believe that we are overreacting to high-density housing, that we are carelessly destroying the city and building housing without paying attention to our sense of community. We need to make sure that everybody can walk to a grocery store, that everybody can walk to a library. We used to have that in Palo Alto, and we don't now because the planning has not been done correctly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dreckmeyer.
Palo Alto has 2.7 jobs for every one employable person. That's what the jobs housing imbalance is. The reason for this is that Palo Alto has favored commercial development, which brings in revenue to the city, whereas housing often costs the city money. The problem is that a lot of people are forced to commute long distances to work in Palo Alto. So there's problems with air pollution, traffic congestion, paving over precious farmland in the Central Valley. And we're also putting the burden of housing on other communities. So we have an obligation to provide more affordable housing. It should be infill housing, close to public transportation, close to jobs and services, so people can use alternative transportation or walk or bike whenever possible. But we also need to make sure that we're not putting the burden of this increased housing on any one particular neighborhood. The Charleston Arastero corridor, there's a lot of housing coming there, and we need to make sure that it's done in a sustainable way. We also need to make sure that we're not putting too much of a burden on our schools and our parks. So we have got a lot of affordable housing, and we have the infrastructure to support it.
Thank you. Ms. Kishimoto, you're next.
Yes, well, affordable housing and especially rental housing is a very important part of Palo Alto's commitment to economic and social diversity. I wanted to point out that in some ways we're not doing that badly. I don't know if most people realize that about half of our housing stock is rental and half is owner occupied. So one important thing is to keep what we have in terms of rental housing. I would also point to the impact fees that we adopted near the beginning of my term, which is contributing funds whenever there's new commercial development. And we also commit federal block fund towards projects like the Opportunity Center that a couple of my colleagues have been working on. So Palo Alto is definitely committed to affordable and rental housing.
Thank you. Mr. Carroll, you're next.
Affordable housing is an issue throughout California. In fact, it's somewhat of an issue across the country. One of the things that is kind of an indicator for what you're supposed to be spending on housing, according to the federal guidelines of being 30%, divide your house payment or your rent by 52.2, and that's what you're supposed to be earning per hour to be able to afford your housing. That doesn't happen in Palo Alto. In order to get more affordable housing in Palo Alto, a higher density model is going to have to be followed. Infill developments have been mentioned, and possibly using some commercial areas that are not wanted by the owners to be used as commercial properties. But we need to seriously look at any and all options for being able to get more housing into Palo Alto. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Klein, you're next.
As mayor and as a city council member, I supported many of the projects that have been described by others, and I still support the creation of some affordable housing, particularly in our downtown areas and next to our transportation lines. But I think we also must face facts that the demand for Palo Alto housing is insatiable, and that we can't solve all of those problems of housing without really making severe damage to our community, not only the city, but also the school district. Because of California's strange systems of financing, each new resident, in effect, is a negative for financial reasons to both the city and the school district. In the southern part of our city, the potential for additional housing units really far outstrips our ability to handle that, both financially and also environmentally. I think we need to really take a second look at that. It's one thing to support affordable housing in some of our downtown and transportation corridors, but it's another thing to support it to such a degree that it will do harm to our city and school district.
Thank you. Mr. Barton, you're next.
Thank you for the question. As a member of the community working group, I bring firsthand experience to this question. I think if the city is going to be serious about developing more affordable housing, and I think that's a crucial thing that we do, we're going to have to do a number of things. The city can play a role in helping to assemble parcels. One of the challenges of affordable housing is that you need greater densities in order to get the subsidies down to a point where you lose the funding gap and the pro forma of the project. Assembling parcels together so that you have a larger project is one way to do that. Another way to do that is through transfer of development rights, allowing developers to transfer rights around so that housing can be built in one or multiple areas. We also need to smooth the planning process. It takes too long and it's very expensive to get affordable housing approved. But we need real focus and real vision and real leadership behind the notion of affordable housing if we're going to achieve it. And that's, I think, something I've brought to that conversation in our community.
Thank you. Mr. Jessman.
My wife and I live at 828 Ramona Street across from Oak Court, the new affordable housing rental project. And it's a beautiful project. We should be proud of it. And that's the type of product we need, housing we need for Palo Alto. We have two components to our affordable housing program. The other component is below market rate condominium units. These are units that are starting to age. We have below market rate condominium units that have deteriorated, and the tenants of those, or the owners of those properties, can no longer afford to maintain them. So what we need to do is leverage those assets. We need to reacquire them when the owners decide to sell them at market rates, and use that money to fund more Oak Courts in Palo Alto, which is the product that really serves the community best.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to some individual questions from the audience, and you will again have 1 minute to answer these questions. Mr. Barton, you are first. What is your position vis-a-vis maintaining Palo Alto's branch library system?
Well, I'm a big fan of libraries, and I believe that we want to have the best possible library system that we can. One of the things that I work with our school district on during our bond is to build or renovate almost 15 new libraries in our community at our schools. And I've talked extensively with the library director about merging our library systems together, the school and the cities, and about her plans to make the best possible library system. I am a great believer in our branch libraries, but I'm also a believer that if the best possible library system for our community is to have fewer, better libraries, particularly when we can combine with what the infrastructure we've built in the school district, then that may be the way to go. But it's going to take a little bit more study and a little bit more time. But I'm not afraid of the kinds of changes we may need to make in this community in order to develop the real vision that we're looking for, whether it be in our parks, our libraries, or other areas.
Thank you. Mr. Klein, you're next. Are you in favor of encouraging housing that would be truly affordable for low-income members of our community?
Well, I think that I started to speak on that when we had that question just a few minutes ago. But let me expand on where we are in this area. We have approximately 1,500 affordable housing units out of our 25,000 in Palo Alto. By affordable here, we're talking about subsidy in one form or another, because if you just leave things to the market, nothing would be affordable in Palo Alto. I think it becomes a question of what the trade-offs are. Our community has a carrying capacity. It can't solve all of these problems. I don't think we should feel guilty, for example, about the jobs-housing imbalance. Lots of places have more jobs than housing. Other places choose to have more housing than jobs. There are no jobs in Los Altos Hills or Atherton. I think that the jobs-housing balance is not a question of our being greedy, it's a question of our being successful. And I think we want to continue to be successful, so that we really have to balance things out throughout our community, not impose a plethora of housing on the southern portion of our community. I think that's one of our priorities.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carroll, you are next. How can the Opportunity Center best serve the homeless population and promote integration into the general community?
The way it can best serve the unhoused population, or the homeless, depending on how you really want to talk about it, is partly just to be there. The lower floor of the Opportunity Center is going to be a service center to replace the Urban Ministry Drop-In Center that is currently located between the Red Cross building and El Camino. On a rainy day, if you stand under the redwood tree, you don't get too wet. The Opportunity Center will not necessarily take anyone off of the street and keep them off the street. What it does is, as its name says, it provides an opportunity for a person to get access to resources that can make that happen. Currently, there are a lot of service providers that have not got the ability to provide services locally because they have no place to do it. There will be office space there at the Opportunity Center that they can timeshare, so to speak, and be able to provide services directly.
Thank you. Ms. Kishimoto, you're next with a question. How can we balance the need for affordable housing with neighborhood residents' concerns regarding traffic?
Can you repeat that question?
How can we balance the need for affordable housing with neighborhood residents' concerns regarding traffic? It's really about traffic, I think.
Well, there's, I mean, to me, the concept of affordable housing really comes to the mix of housing in Palo Alto. I mean, I think people choose Palo Alto as a community because we're not a community of, for example, only single-family homes spread around the city. We have, each neighborhood is different, and hopefully we do have a variety of housing units and income levels in each neighborhood. I mean, I think it's not very interesting to live in a very homogeneous neighborhood. So I don't think the concept of having affordable housing necessarily causes traffic for the neighborhoods. I think what causes traffic for the neighborhoods is having too many units of whether it's affordable or not, or not having the public transportation system that's necessary if indeed we are going to go for higher density housing in Palo Alto.
Thank you. Mr. Dreckmeyer, you're next. Do you support infill development? Where and what type? And the question asker says housing versus retail versus commercial.
As an environmental advocate, I've worked really hard to protect the green belt, the Stanford foothills, and other rural areas in Santa Clara and San Mateo counties. So the question is, if we're not going to develop those areas for housing, where are we going to put the people? California is growing. We're adding the equivalent of another San Jose every 2 years, another Los Angeles every 7 years. Population growth is a huge environmental problem, and it's impacting our local communities. So the answer is, we need the affordable housing to keep people like teachers and service workers close to their jobs in the community. And it needs to be near public transportation. I think a good example of affordable housing that really works well is Alma Place over near downtown, where there's one parking space for every 2 people living there, every 2 units. And it works because people are using alternative transportation. They're taking advantage of Caltrain, they're walking for their errands, they're bicycling, and so the infill needs to be close to services and public transportation.
Thank you. Ms. Martell, I have a question for you next. What are your thoughts regarding the proposed new police station?
Well, I think it's a ridiculous proposal. I don't think that we need a new police station that costs over $90 million plus. That is planned to be squeezed from the community to pay for it. It's 3 times larger than our present police station or our needs. Our city has nearly grown to its limits. I wonder what Police Chief Lynn Johnson is expecting from the community to want a large police station like that. A police station that big becomes a business and an industry, and one has to keep it going. Our crimes are mostly crimes of property. They aren't crimes of violence. We're an opulent community. We have the Stanford Shopping Center. This is a terrible waste of our money. We won't need Auto Row if we don't have this police station, and we won't have the money problems that we have today if we don't have this police station or Lynn Johnson.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Frost, your question is next. How would you determine when we have too much housing?
That won't happen in Palo Alto. No. Thanks for the question. Housing is an important issue in Palo Alto. It's an important core issue. Again, we go to transitional housing. Come by Whole Foods Market tomorrow. We'll go into it in depth on how it works. Thank you.
Thank you. If that's your answer, that's fine with me. All right, so my next question is for Mr. Morton. What lessons should the city learn from the loss of Hyatt Ricky's, the Alma Street Albertsons, Agilent, and auto dealers? What should the city do differently in the future?
Well, I think the first lesson the city should learn from the loss of Albertsons and Ricky's Hyatt is that we should not force industries and businesses that are already in our community to stand in line for 8 or 9 years while they attempt to upgrade their facilities. It's much easier to preserve the basic revenue stream that you have than it is to replace it. You can't just snap your fingers and find another Albertsons to come into your community. Once we lose these organizations, we are, in a sense, behind the 8 ball, because now we have to get back to zero, we have to replace them. So I think that the first thing we have to do is change the processes that make development take so long in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Holman, you're next. How do you propose keeping auto dealers in town? I might change the grammar. How do you propose to keep auto dealers in town?
Well, it's a significant question in the community right now, and there's been significant conversation about it, as I'm sure everyone knows. I think what we ought to be looking at is how autos are going to be sold in the distant future. We need to be looking at the fact that cars are going to be sold a lot more frequently online, and what are the needs going down the line in a more comprehensive fashion of acreage. We could be looking at also something that Redwood City did. They got or attracted a boutique dealership to the El Camino Real, and we could be doing something along those lines too. And we might be looking at having smaller acreage, talking with the dealerships about having smaller acreage, off-site storage of vehicles, and combining several dealerships in a smaller land area, again, utilizing the off-site storage and the fact that cars are going to be sold online. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, I have a question for you now. What solutions do you champion to encourage economic development in Palo Alto?
I think the first thing we have to do is make Palo Alto a much business-friendlier community. Only about 12% of our businesses belong to the Chamber of Commerce. So that means 88% are unrepresented. One of the things I propose to do is become closer to the business community. I've spent my whole life dealing with businesses through the banking business, and I'm comfortable with talking with owners and managers of businesses. We must streamline the Palo Alto process. We must coordinate it. We must remember, while it takes a long time, market forces will not wait. And a classic example is the Alma Plaza as the market forces changed and Albertson's situation changed. So we must become more friendly to the city, and that's throughout the city in all departments, streamlining, working together to keep the businesses that we have and attract new ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Justman, why should the city do either more or less to generate affordable housing, and what specific methods might you advocate to accomplish these ends?
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, we have two components to our affordable housing program. One is apartment buildings that we build, and then the Palo Alto Housing Corp manages them and rents them out. And the other is the below market rate ownership units. So for example, at 800 High Street, the city requires the developer to sell, say, 10 units to below market rate owners. Those units we, in effect, lose control over. The owners obtain title to them and control them. And what we're finding with our older units is that the owners can no longer afford to maintain them. So when there's an assessment for a new deck or new roof, they don't have the money to do it. And this is a waste of our assets. So as the units age, we need to reacquire them and then sell them at market rates and use that money to build affordable rental projects like Oak Court.
Thank you. Now I'm going to do another question for all of you to answer, in a different order, of course. The question has to do with budget. What would you do to balance budget needs and the need to maintain infrastructure and provide community services? This question poses examples such as libraries and the arts. Mr. Justman, you're first for this one.
As I said in my opening statement, we have very well-run nonprofits in our community. We're blessed with some nonprofit groups that provide us wonderful services. La Comida serves 40,000 hot lunches a year to seniors with a very efficient budget and a very dedicated staff. We can provide services that we cherish through nonprofit and public partnerships with the city. And this type of service model will enable us to keep the services we need and not cut the services that we cherish. And it will relieve the financial burden of providing services with city staff that have high benefit packages and the burden that's associated with those benefit packages. We've demonstrated with nonprofits in the past that we can provide services efficiently and at a reasonable rate, and we can do that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, you're next.
Yes, I think the budget has two components. You have the revenue side and the expense side. On the expense side, we have some built-in costs. For instance, the retirement benefits to our employees, the health care benefits, 100% paid for, even if you're retired, which is very, very expensive. And in a sense, we don't get any service for that, paying for past services. So we must take a look at all of our expenses and be very competitive. On the revenue side, we must increase revenue. One of the things I would propose is that we become more competitive on our hotel tax. We are by far the lowest of any of the cities around us, and we have the industrial base where people want to stay here. It's a quick fix for some revenue, and I think we also need to make use of volunteers. For instance, in the library, I think there's great examples of we can get free help, if you will, through our volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Holman, you're next.
Yes, I think there are some city process efficiencies that would benefit the community, and that meaning that we could reduce city costs through a more efficient process. We would be more friendly to business and to retail by having more efficient process. Additionally, the council last February adopted a program that I had recommended or suggested, which was to make the city take advantage of, or make the city available to, this project available to the city of utilizing the same proposals that the private development can use. And that program will end up with the city earning about several $1 million for infrastructure that will serve the public.
Thank you. Mr. Morton.
Well, as chair of the Finance Committee, it may come as a surprise to you that we have balanced the budget in each of the last 4 years. We've not only balanced the budget, we've put money into the infrastructure, and at the same time, we have preserved most of the programs that Palo Alto values. We have limitations because many of our employees have contractual obligations with the city. The unionized employees have multi-year contracts. In the past 4 years, we have reduced city staff by over 70 positions. We have tried to look at each of the positions. The city manager starts with the local people, with the local staff, asks them how they can cut, uses the people that are going to implement the programs to find efficiencies. And by doing this and by using attrition, we have managed to keep our city in budget in balance and yet still preserve those services most of us value so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Frost.
Thank you. The budget, the deficit, our city, we need jobs right now for people that live in houses, much less the homeless. if you have a job, you can put money on the kitchen table for the wife and kids, pay the mortgage, etc. We don't have that. We don't have an employment program that works in Palo Alto. We don't even have one. And the Opportunity Center is not going to provide jobs, job searches. That doesn't work. I want to go to work now as a day laborer on the Opportunity Center. They said no. We have a lot of people that want to go to work now. You go to work, you get money, you pay taxes. The deficit comes down.
Thank you. Ms. Martell, you're next.
Palo Alto would be in a much stronger financial state if we had a better police chief that doesn't waste our money. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawsuits that we wouldn't have to spend if we didn't have Lynn Johnson in charge.
In the rules that you received, you were asked to, all the candidates were asked to stick on topic for the questions. Would you like to complete your answer?
I'm answering it the best that I can. The other council candidates were all given briefing classes for this forum, and I was excluded from these
Ms.
classes
Martell, I'm going
by
to have to
Emily
ask you to just
Harrison.
stick to the question at hand. Okay? Would you like to answer the question?
Well, I believe we'd have a healthier budget if we elected our mayor instead of appointed our mayor, and the mayor worked with the community to appoint a police chief more appropriate for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dreckmeyer, you're next.
Well, I think we can continue to trim some of the fat out of the budget. In recent years, as people have retired, staff have retired, we have not filled those positions. We've shuffled other staff positions around, so we're down to 1998 and 1999 staff levels. That's an improvement. We've also been making an improvement on the benefits package. The problem there is past city councils, instead of paying higher salaries at the present, they've basically back-ended the benefits and given these great retirement packages so that after only 5 years, people were entitled to retire and get 100% of their benefits. Now, after 10 years, it's 50%. After 20 years, it's 100%, so we're moving in the right direction. I support the hotel tax to keep on par with our neighboring communities. 100% of that money comes into Palo Alto. And I also support having more point of sales in Palo Alto, not just the offices for certain companies, but if the sales takes place in Palo Alto, we get the sales tax. I favor retail over commercial or over office space. Thank you.
Ms. Kishimoto, you're next.
Thank you. The budget does continue to be a serious challenge for Palo Alto, because it's true that even though we've managed to keep balanced budgets in the last couple of years, the long-term trends are ominous. For example, this last year, we worked hard to reduce staffing, to cut costs, and we added many fees, which you may have felt. But at the same time, we added $5 million in benefit costs in just 1 year. In what my colleagues have talked about, revenue increases, I support productivity investments, but I think what we really need to do over the next couple of years is roll up our sleeves and talk pretty seriously about how we can truly almost revolutionize our service delivery model for City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carroll.
I'd like to see the city departments take a hard look at their individual budgets, department by department, and see if we can save some money starting at the nickel and dime level. I don't know how many of you realize it, but the city doesn't buy just one kind of toilet paper for all the city facilities. Why do we have to have 2 different kinds of toilet paper? Wouldn't it be cheaper to just have one? How many different types of copying paper do they have to use in order to satisfy all the copiers and printers that they have? Those are the kind of things where the nickels and dimes can add up. Coming from somebody who's been very conscientious about nickels and dimes and pennies for a number of years, in fact, I shop on sale even though I'm on food stamps, the nickels and dimes add up to dollars. You pick up 100 pennies, you've got $1. And I think the city ought to start picking up some of the pennies instead of watching them roll into the gutter.
Thank you. Mr. Klein, you're next.
Thank you. Everything starts with the budget. Unless we have our budget under control, we really can't do a lot of the other things that we really want to do. To get our budget under control, I think we need to increase revenue. I am in favor of the increased hotel tax. Even more, I would like to see us work hard to find an additional place for a hotel, a new hotel in Palo Alto. We can do it better in getting additional sales tax revenue. Let me switch briefly to the expense side. Two items quickly come to mind. The federal government recommends that we should have one manager for every 15 employees. Palo Alto has one for every 7. In other words, we have twice as many managers as we should. Similarly, our benefits package for our employees costs almost half of what they're paid in salary. In the private sector, that number is 27–28%. So our benefits package will require some hard negotiating with our union, but it really needs to be brought under control. We need to find more money for our infrastructure. We've talked about a police building. There's no money being set aside for it right now. We need to do that.
Mr. Barton.
The last 8 years, I've balanced our school district's budgets each year, whether we were in the boom times or whether we were in the bust times. And we did that by truly understanding our revenue side and our expenditure side, and by building good reserve policies for both using the reserves as well as repaying the reserves. On the revenue side in the city, we need to work much harder at attracting and retaining businesses in this community. We are losing hotels, we're losing grocery stores, we're losing retail companies, and we're losing high-tech companies. We must work much harder to bring those folks here and to keep the ones that we have here. One auto dealer provides the same amount of sales tax as all of California Avenue. So when we lose one, we lose a big piece. One auto dealer provides the same cost of running the junior museum. So when we lose one large company like that, we lose tremendous amounts of revenue. On the expenditure side, we need to be very careful, and we must negotiate much clearer with our benefits folks, and we need to work to build coalitions of other agencies for benefits.
Thank you. I think that was everybody, right? Okay. We have another question that I'm going to give to all of you. There's quite a bit of interest in this topic. It has to do with business license taxes. Many in the business community believe that the cost of doing business in Palo Alto is higher than elsewhere, particularly in the time and cost of obtaining, planning, and building approvals. The city can no longer boast about lower utility rates for its largest utility customers. If you favor a new business license tax, how would you ensure that it does not have a negative impact on business? And generally, what is your opinion on the business license tax? And I'm going to let Mr. Justman go first.
Thank you. I'm opposed to a business license tax. Currently, Roche, one of our premier business citizens, pays more for natural gas in Palo Alto than it does anywhere else where it's located. We have our own utilities, and we've been using our utilities, of course, to charge businesses fees so that we can subsidize the services we like and cherish. As a result, the business license tax is really unfair to the business community, since they're already paying more than their fair share in the utility charges that are imposed upon them every month. So the business license tax would be a negative signal to the business community, and would send the signal that they're only looking at more and more burdens on themselves, so that our services aren't cut. We need to just protect our own services.
Thank you. Mr. Barton.
I do not support a business license tax. I am in favor of a business registry. The difference is very important. A business license tax brings in revenue that can go into the general fund. A business registry allows the city to understand what businesses, what types of businesses, how long they've been in the community, and it would be revenue neutral, essentially paying the cost of that registry. I do not believe that if we're going to reach out to the community, and I have served on the Mayor's Retail Attraction Committee this last year, and as chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, worked with the city to try and attract new retail business to our community. I don't think we can say to the business community, we're interested in having you come to our community. We want to work with you in a new way. We want to make things easier for you here, and then turn around and apply a tax. immediately. That's an inconsistent statement. I think we need to get our house in order in terms of how we relate to the business community, in terms of how we attract revenue to the community, and then we can talk about a tax.
Thank you. Mr. Klein.
I agree with what John just said with regard to the difference between a business license tax and a business registration fee. I support the registration fee. I'm opposed to the business license tax. That's primarily because I think we need to establish a better climate with our business people in the community. We need to work with them to find better solutions than we've been having over the last 5, 10, 15 years. For example, we've been losing a significant amount of sales tax on what's called business-to-business transactions. That is, when a sale is made by a business to another business, the sales tax money to a city goes to the place which is designated by the company as its sales office. We need to work with our businesses like HP, and unfortunately Agilent is no longer with us, or will shortly be out, to have those sales tax dollars come to Palo Alto. We also need to work with our business community to find ways to fill up those vacant spaces on University Avenue and California Avenue. We need to work more closely so that we can get our budget in balance, so not just balanced at a low level, but so that can support the infrastructure improvements we need in our community.
Thank you. Mr. Carroll.
Actually, this is a topic that spoke about last night at the Finance Committee hearing, or excuse me, meeting. I prefer the idea of the fee. The city does need to have an idea of what kind of businesses are in town, so it can have an idea of what kind of businesses it needs to attract in order to have a well-rounded community resource of businesses for the community to use. I propose the idea that businesses who are already paying fees to a membership association, such as either the Chamber of Commerce or the Downtown Business Improvement District or CADA, be able to get a waiver because they're already part of a registry of sorts, and they're part of a group that is already committed to helping the community financially. Unfortunately, that idea didn't make a whole lot of progress through the commission last night.
Thank you. Ms. Kishimoto, I'll have you next.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I was there at the Finance Committee meeting just 1 or 2 nights ago. I do definitely support the business registry. We need the information to better serve the businesses and help Palo Altans shop Palo Alto. We don't even know which businesses we have in town. The business license tax, I am in support of taking a look at seriously. Palo Alto is only one of 2 communities in the entire state of California which does not have a business license tax. So I don't think we can say that we would be driving any businesses out of it. I am also in support of looking at the overall burden on the businesses to make sure that there is no unfair burden on any particular segments, especially our retail. And overall, I'm in favor of restructuring our tax base so that it's more reflective of the changing economy and making sure that no tax is overburdensome on any one sector.
Thank you. Mr. Dreckmeyer.
I support either a registry or a fee. One of the reasons is if we get more information on the businesses in Palo Alto and the employees, it might turn out that our jobs housing imbalance is not quite as dire as the 2.7 to 1. And then there's less pressure on Palo Alto from the state, which does have the ability to hold back funds if we're not meeting our obligations for affordable housing. With a fee, as Yoriko mentioned, we're one of 2 communities that does not have a fee, so I don't think it would necessarily scare away businesses, but the question is how big is that fee? And would it generate enough money to offset the problems that it would cause in the business community? If some of that funding goes into improving the business climate in Palo Alto, then everyone could benefit if we are generating more revenue.
Thank you. Ms. Martell, you're next.
I don't support an increased business license tax. I hear a lot of complaints from shop owners around here that we are not business friendly enough. Especially down on University Avenue, we can't even keep the street lights on down there. There's been some street lights on, off towards the end of the street that's been off for a couple of years now. A lot of the shop owners think that those large parking lots, buildings that were bought for downtown were really to keep the traffic out of the neighborhood, not to bring business in there. The utilities department, we make money on our utilities department. Sure, we have a little break than the other towns because we own it, but we make something like 12% on that. So I don't think it's going to go over very well with the shopkeepers to increase their business license tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Frost.
This is a serious issue. It has many parameters. One of them is the homeless problem downtown. We don't need another tax. The merchants are leaving. We have to bring them in. And the city streets team program isn't working. Read the Palo Alto Weekly for my in-depth interview on how to take this problem away from us and resolve it to a competent level. We need to bring more people in to do business with a positive atmosphere, not more taxes.
Thank you. Mr. Morton.
I oppose a business license and a business registry fee for the same reason that I opposed a fee at the Baylands, primarily because it costs a disproportionate amount to collect, and what you get out of it is generally annoyance of those that you're charging the fee for. The city can do a survey of the businesses in the community for less than $10,000. So my colleague, Councilmember Kishimoto, and I at last night's Finance Committee sent to the full council the proposal that we do such a survey and that the city fund it. In this last year, I introduced to my colleagues, with the cooperation of the Chamber of Commerce, the Palo Alto Business District Downtown Assessment. I think we need to give it a chance to bloom and to deal with before we oppose another level of taxation on the business community that, as everybody has already mentioned, is struggling to survive in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Holman.
Yes, I do not support a business tax, but I do support a business registry. Reasons being that I believe that having such a registry would help us to identify what compatible services we need to make for a healthier business climate, for our retail climate. There are other things that we can do to help our retail that exists and retail that wants to come to town. It can take months at this point in time to get a permit to move into an existing building, for instance. It can cost up to $1,200, I've been told by retailers, to get a permit to participate in Art Walk. It can take months to get a permit to have an open house for an existing retailer. If we streamline these processes and make more efficient these processes, we'll do a lot to help our retailers.
And Mr. Smith.
Yes, one of the reasons I'm running, I'm a business person, have spent my whole life in the business community. When I was the vice president and manager of the Wells Fargo at El Camino in California, I was very involved in the community. Now we have people coming in by car and leaving by car. The sense of community is not here. The Business Improvement District can't collect the money from some of the largest companies in the world. We need to become more business friendly. Not a business tax, but a business registry. Wouldn't we all like to have Google in Palo Alto, where they started? No, they're in Mountain View. But if we'd have had that knowledge, working closely with the businesses, we can keep them here. The other night at the council, there was a proposal to improve California Avenue. Only 2 people spoke. There should have been 40 business people there. And one of the things I will do is work closely with the businesses to get them involved, get them down to City Hall, to be vocal, to energize our business community.
Thank you. It's hard to believe, but we're on our last question for the candidates from the audience. I'm going to give this question to all of you, and you'll again have 1 minute to answer. What is your vision for Palo Alto 20 years from now regarding parks and open space? What do we do now, or what do we need to do now to achieve this? Ms. Martell, you're first this time.
Well, I know it's crucial that we have good planning in our population growth. I think that we should the growth is coming no matter what we do. So right now it's critical that we stake out the areas that we want to keep free from being destroyed. Like, I believe that downtown Palo Alto should be closed to cars, and people should walk down there or bicycle like they do in Cannery Row in Monterey. I believe that we should decide where we want our parks and not make any more compromises on them. I think we should just decide right now where we want our grocery stores, where we want our libraries, and hold to it and have everyone adjust to those plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Klein.
My vision of Palo Alto is and has been a community that's remarkably vital because it has a variety of things going for it. A vital business community, excellent residential stock, retail, the great university across El Camino. All those things, I think, make for a great community. An essential element of that is that we have an adequate park system. And we have had, but things have changed. For example, the demand for girls' sports has been a factor. Also, the fact that we lost a number of school sites during the 80s. So we're going to have to be creative because we're out of available land primarily. Thus, I think that it's been very intriguing, and I really support the idea that Council Member Judy Kleinberg and Planning Commissioner Pat Byrd have floated, that we take a look at whether we can refigure our golf course to find some additional land out there for athletic fields for our kids and other uses. Looks to me like there could be another maybe 20 acres freed up out there. It's that type of creative thinking that we need.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, you're next.
My vision of Palo Alto in the future with the parks is one of the reasons we formed Friends of the Palo Alto Parks. We must have a public-private partnership to create the parks that we need. We get impact fees now, but those are fees. We need pocket parks in the new developments where the population is growing. We need to work very closely with some of our more wealthy people to get them to open their pocketbooks, which we're going to do in paying for the Bressler property in the Rastradero Preserve. So we cannot, once we lose, for instance, at Hyatt, we have lost that, that is gone forever. We have to take a look in the future, and pocket parks, I think, are really great. There's one at Ash and Grant, for instance. You see a lot of elderly people having their lunches. We need to always be looking for any space that we can make a park.
Thank you. Mr. Barton.
My vision for parks 20 years from now is that we have at least what we have now, that Foothills Park is still for Palo Altans, that we see an increased variety of wildlife and growth and preservation of Foothills Park and the Rastradero Preserve. I see more pocket parks in our future, small little parks, whether they're green or hardscaped. I would like to see us focus much more on our hardscaped parks, our plazas downtown and in our shopping areas that in many cases are nowhere near the quality of our green parks. If we're going to do that, we're going to have to look at continual maintenance. We can't allow those to run down and then come back and do a bond or renovate them again in 20 years. We need to maintain them over time, whether it's the sprinkler systems, whether it's the areas where the kids play, whether it's the benches, the basketball courts or whatnot. We need to continue to support our infrastructural funds and our maintenance funds if we're going to expect to keep all of our wonderful parks and add to them.
Thank you. Mr. Justman.
I'm concerned about our parks. The city council has been balancing the budget by, in effect, deferring maintenance. For example, the budget was balanced in June by cutting the funding of maintenance of the parks. And this concerns me because if we're going to maintain the services we cherish, the parks, the Junior Museum, the Children's Library, we can no longer defer maintenance of those assets. We deferred maintenance of the Children's Library for many, many years. We are continuing to defer maintenance of the Junior Museum. These assets will deteriorate to a state of disrepair in 20 years unless we recommit our budget to the services we cherish instead of committing our balanced budget to the increasing of fees and salaries and benefits to the staff.
Thank you. Next, I'll go to Mr. Frost.
Thank you. I like this one. We need new ideas, new concepts. One of these new ideas is the Palo Alto Duck Pond redevelopment. We'll put a bar and grill in there, the Mallard Club, of course, and we'll have the 10 families coming down. This is also for jobs, day labor. Let's get out there with the shovels and the hose and clean that place up. It's a dump. When I was a kid, I went down there. It was a great place to go. Now it smells. So let's do some redevelopment of our parks. As a city council person, I'm going to be hot on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kishimoto.
Thank you. To me, the very identity and soul of Palo Alto lies in its very generous open space in both the foothills and the baylands. So it's just very critical that we continue to ferociously guard that open space. In the more urbanized areas, thanks to the work of people like Enid Pearson, we have the park dedication ordinance, which means that we won't easily lose what we have in terms of urban parks. But the Sofa Park recently was the first new park that we added. And I do believe that we do need to seriously start identifying a site for a new park, especially in South Palo Alto. That when the Hyatt and the Elks is being redeveloped right now, I would have really loved to see a piece of that either purchased or dedicated to parkland, and that process is very important.
Thank you. Ms. Holman.
Yes, Palo Alto is blessed to have its dedicated parkland, and in the urbanized areas we have very little open space left. What I proposed for the SOFA plan, that was the South of Forest Avenue plan, was to allow development in exchange for public open space, and the City Council adopted that proposal. That public open space could be used for pocket parks. I also oppose the city selling its city-owned parcels for development. I believe that city-owned land, if it is disposed of, should be sold for any opportunity for public open space.
Thank you. Next, I'll go to Mr. Morton.
My vision for Palo Alto Parks comes from a comment that a client made to me just recently. And he came to me excitedly and said he had just taken his grandson to one of the new upgraded parks. In the last 4 years, we have upgraded every one of our neighborhood parks. We've added Heritage Park downtown. We've added playing fields at Mayfield. We've added the Bressler property to the Arastadero Preserve. And in the next few years, we're going to add 100 acres of landfill into the parks. What's exciting about being in Palo Alto is the fact that we enjoy our parks as individuals. We go to Foothill, we go to the Baylands, and if we continue that, we will have another generation of thrilled people to live here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dreckmeyer.
I don't know if there's a lot more to be said. Obviously, we're very, very fortunate in Palo Alto to have a great park system, both urban and preserves, and it's thanks largely to some of the people in the audience here, Enid Pearson and Emily Renzel. We're very fortunate that leaders have had the vision to look ahead, and we as the leaders of today need to look ahead for the future of Palo Alto. I agree with what other people have said regarding the pocket parks. I think the old Palo Alto Medical Center site is a great example of a large development that was required to include a park, 2-acre park as part of that. And I support physical creation of parks versus the in lieu fees that get developers out of actually having to produce the park, but just contributing money to the fund.
Thank you. Mr. Carroll.
I keep hearing the pocket park. I'm used to calling them mini parks. That's kind of what they were called when I was around different areas. I'd like to see more of those. Anytime any kind of a development is done of any sort, publicly accessible open space, preferably not all hardscape. I think would enhance the neighborhood for it, not just the that individual development, but the neighborhood around it would have access to a place to sit under a tree and read a book. I'd like to see partnership with some of the conservation organizations in the area to watch development in the hills, especially in the area around Foothill Park. As people tend to move up into the hills, there needs to be caution about any development that's going on up in that area. And I'd like to see Palo Alto participate strongly in the Greenbelt and Bay Trail processes that have been going on.
Thank you. Just checking to see that I got all of you. I think I did. All right. Now we're going to go to closing statements. As I explained earlier, these will be done in the reverse order from the opening statements, the numbers that you drew, and each candidate will have 1.5 minutes for your closing statement. Mr. Carroll, you're first.
I was going to say, I guess that means me.
Yes, it does, if my system is working.
I'm a different candidate. That's obvious. I might not be much to look at, but I think I have a lot to offer. A can opener doesn't look like a hell of a lot, but it can help you eat. I'm not a one-issue candidate, as some people up here might be. I'd like to see Palo Alto become a community with neighborhoods instead of just a collection of neighborhoods, as it sometimes appears to be now. I'd like to see our government be something that is in action instead of our government in action. And one thing I've always kind of believed is if you always do what you've always done, you only get what you've already got.
Thank you. Mr. Dreckmeyer.
I think we have some big challenges ahead. Climate change is one of them, and we've seen what happened in New Orleans. Natural disasters are increasing, becoming more severe. Many climatologists believe that's induced by climate change. Here locally, there could be increased cases of flooding with rises in the bay level. Obviously, there's going to be a big impact on our water supply as the snowpack melts earlier in the season. That will affect hydropower. I think Palo Alto needs to be a more self-sustaining city. We need to become more energy independent, and that's energy efficiency and also renewable energy here in our community. I would love to see solar panels on the roofs of all the government buildings and participating businesses in addition to houses. We need to be prepared for the earthquake that is going to eventually hit again in this area. And we really need to be able to turn to each other for community. The neighborhood associations in Palo Alto are doing a great job of bringing people together to address challenging issues coming up, to be prepared for such emergencies. And we really need to encourage more of that. We're in this together. We've got a wonderful community, great smarts, world-class university right here, leaders in high technology. We need to be the leaders in the future of the economy. I think that environmental practices and technologies are going to be a big part of that economy, and I'd like to see Palo Alto be a leader in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morton.
When friends and residents asked me why I would run again, I had to stop and think about it. And I tried to turn the tables on them and said, well, why would you want me to run again? And among the things that they talked about was, the first thing they always said to me was, well, you're independent, you'll speak out, and you're not afraid to take a position that might not be the most popular position. Of course, most people know that I'm a CPA and that I have fiscal sense. But I think the second thing they said to me was, you not only have fiscal sense, but you have common sense. And you can see when issues that are brought forward by staff, like a fee at the Baylands, just simply don't make sense from a fiscal point of view. But ultimately, when they came back to me, what they cared most about is that as a founder of the Trust for Community Skating and as a founder for the Palo Alto Recreation Foundation, I care deeply about program. In fact, I care passionately that the things that our children enjoyed should be available to the next generation. And so with a combination of fiscal concerns tempered by a concern that the services that we all value be preserved, that's what I ran on the first time, and that's what I'm running on the second time. I hope you'll support me in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Holman, you are next.
I'd like to close with another quote, this one by Henry Clay. It was placed in the pavement in front of City Hall by the City Council of 1970. And this one goes, "Government is a trust, and the officers of the government are the trustees, and both the trust and the trustees were created for the benefit of the people." Do we have a wonderful community? I believe we do. Can we do better to make a better community? I believe we can. Can we once again become the visionaries that we once were? I believe we must. And together, I believe we will. I appreciate your support.
Thank you. Ms. Kishimoto.
Thank you. Through this evening, I hope that you've gained some sense of who I am and what my beliefs and values are. But let me summarize for you 4 reasons why you should vote for me on November 8th. Number 1 is independence. I am known for rolling up my sleeves and studying issues and budgets in depth. I ask questions so that I can be a knowledgeable and an independent voice for you. Second is impact. I speak softly, but as they say, I carry a big stick. I believe I do have impact in the city and in the region. People listen because I am persistent, and I'm usually right, and I've actually spent a lot of time developing relationships, working relationships with people, so that we can get things done for you. 3, integrity. I'm deeply committed to the greater good of the community. I'm also committed to an open, rigorous process to create the best possible future for you. 4th, vision and leadership. I hold a very strong vision that we do, in fact, control the future of our community. We have much more control than we realize. I believe that Palo Alto can continue to be an economically vital and world-class community just because, precisely because we so ferociously protect our environmental and community values for you and the future generations. It has been the greatest privilege to work for you, and I hope you vote for me on November 8th.
Thank you very much. Mr. Frost.
If elected, we will have a natural disaster relief center that works, in all seriousness. We will have a shelter that works. We'll have an employment program where a man can put money on the kitchen table at the end of the day for his wife and kids. We don't have that now. And one other important thing that the people have brought up to me, I will be accessible. You'll be able to talk to me. You'll be able to find me. You can bitch at me, yell at me, engage me in an argument, become friends, and give me $5 if you wish. But you'll be able to find me. Right now, with the city council people, good luck. So please, vote for me, and we'll get some things done in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Justman.
We need to create a sustainable budget for our children so that they inherit the same Palo Alto that we've enjoyed. We have been deferring projects that we need to complete. In the early 1970s, we were promised that our utilities would be undergrounded within 40 years. That's not going to happen. It needs to happen. We're very keenly aware of natural disasters now, and when we have an earthquake, we still will have the danger of fallen electrical lines across Alma. And if you drive down Alma and you look at the trees along Alma, you see how they've been butchered to enable the electrical lines to stay above ground. We need to create a canopy in Palo Alto that's free of electrical lines. We need to create a community that doesn't have to worry about down power lines and the disaster that will inevitably hit us in an earthquake. We have been deferring many things. We've deferred the maintenance of our libraries. Our libraries are deteriorated. And I live in Ramona Street near the downtown library. It's not even open on Sunday. So we've been balancing the budget, but we've been neglecting important services and important infrastructure items that make Palo Alto a terrific place. And if we're going to address those problems, we need a sustainable budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barton.
Thank you both, all the sponsors, very much for being here, and once again thank my colleagues on the dais for being here as well. Whether it's been as a school board member, whether it's been as a nonprofit leader, whether it's been as a parent, I have felt, and a husband, it's been very important to me to serve our community and to work for the benefit of all of us. Whether it's been in all of those areas, I've helped develop a vision for what we're doing. I've helped lead us to that vision. I've worked on the budgeting of those areas, and I've worked on the implementation of infrastructure. Those are the areas that we are struggling with in our community. We need to work on infrastructure, we need to work on budget, but most of all, we need to work on a shared vision of where we're going in this community, and we need to lead to that vision passionately and directly. I am pleased to be endorsed by a majority of the council. I'm pleased to be endorsed by the Sierra Club. I'm pleased to be endorsed by the League of Conservation Voters. I'm pleased to be endorsed by a whole range of leaders in our community who have seen my experience on the school board these last 8 years struggling with budget issues, have seen my experience as the chair of the Chamber of Commerce working with the city to try and develop retail and business support in our community, and in helping the homeless and building affordable housing in our community. I respectfully ask for your support on Election Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Yes, the city, as I mentioned earlier, is a big business, a big service business. And what we need is strong leadership. We have a strong city manager. I was a strong CEO. I have dealt with board of directors. I am on the board of 2 public companies. We need a vision of where we're going and then how to get there. The city council's main job is to create policy and then turn to the city manager to carry out that policy. And he must do it in a timely manner and within the financial controls. I'm on the board of 2 companies where I'm on the audit committee. I have the financial experience. I had 500 people working with me at Silicon Valley Bank. We need strong leadership on both the city manager and the city council, a strong leader who will be willing to make tough decisions and to move forward and not put out fires every Monday night, not bring up things that we've decided in the past. We must work hard and run the city like you would run a very good business. We have some of the finest and most imaginative businesses in our area, and I believe with strong leadership on the council, we can be the best run city in California. I want your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Klein.
Thank you. As I've gone around the community, I've been talking about 3 issues primarily. One is our financial situation, our budget. And I think we've said enough about that for tonight, but there's a lot more to be said about it, and I would urge you to look at my views on our website, larrykleinforcitycouncil.com. .net, excuse me. The other 2 issues I've been talking about are quality of life and leadership. Quality of life, I think we need to become the leader that we used to be on environmental matters. Just compare our website with Portland and Boulder, and you'll see that they're taking many more initiatives, particularly with regard to global warming. We need to be back there taking that leadership position again. Quality of life locally, I think we need to revisit how much housing we can put in South Palo Alto. I think that the zoning we have now allows too much. Leadership, maybe that's a good place to end because that's really where everything begins. 2 aspects to leadership that I want to address here tonight. One is, I think it's important that we restore the balance between the city council and the city manager. City council's job is to set policy. City manager's job is to carry it out. I think that we've had the city manager really getting too much over into the policy area. Decision making. I think we had some examples in the last few years where delay has been the decision maker rather than people. Alamo Plaza and Ricky's are the 2 examples of that. It's possible, and we should have a system where people address the issues fully, debate is full, and the council decides, not delay. I would very much appreciate your support on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martell, your closing statement.
I am going to read the opening and closing paragraph of an article that appeared in our newspaper today, the Palo Alto Daily News. Police calls to oversee police clearly going nowhere. During the past few years, Palo Alto has had its share of police problems. the alleged beating of a black man by 2 police officers, and the forced confession of an 18-year-old who was then cleared by DNA tests are just 2 examples. So many in our town have urged that a police review body be created to investigate complaints from the public and to review police activities. Palo Alto had 6 months to fix this problem. We've gotten nowhere. It's time now for the council to take ownership of the police department. Their initial punting to the commission and Dennis did not work. We think the issue is a big enough one that complaints about the police should go directly to the council. If the Nest thinks this may take up too much of council's time, he should make sure the police department is functioning in a way that does not provide public complaints. If the council doesn't want to take on this important role, that's fine. Residents will have a chance in early November to elect 5 members for the council who may want to solve this problem rather than avoid the issue. Vote for a change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will again remind the audience about my request earlier. Okay, that's everyone's closing statements. That brings to a close my part of the evening. I'd like to thank the audience and the co-sponsors and the candidates for a lively and informative evening. And I'm going to turn the program back to Veronica Tincher now.
Thank you, Sigrid, again for being a wonderful moderator for this forum. And thank you, candidates, for participating in a lively discussion to assist our voters when they make their decisions on November 8th. Special thanks go to Heather Trossman, our chair, for putting so much time and effort into this event, and also to Doris Peterson, our timekeeper, for keeping us on time. Thank you. Thanks to the question screeners, Irene Sampson, Bonnie Packer, and Sally Probst. They had yeoman job for organizing these questions and making sure that we keep them going. Also to the greeters and the question collectors, Audrey Jacob, Carol Harrington, and Diana Steeples. Appreciation goes to Mary Jo Levy, who arranged the refreshments that you will all have a chance to partake. And all of you were great in making this forum work. And another thanks goes to Noemi Ruelas and the New Voices Young People for their participation. Finally, a big thank you to the Media Center and all its crew for all the work that they put in to make this forum come to the air. Now, the League's ballot measures on the pros and cons and the voters' guides will be out probably next week or by the end of next week, so please look for them in the libraries and other public areas. And don't forget www.smartvoter.org for more information, and really don't forget to vote on November 8th. We have 2 more candidates forums coming up, sponsored by the League and our co-sponsors. On September 27th, next week, there will be a daytime at Lucy Stern Community Center, 11:30. This will be a brown bag lunch. And then with the city council candidates again. And then on October 6th, there will be a candidates forum for the Palo Alto Unified School District candidates at 7 o'clock at the District Boardroom, 25 Churchill. So thank you again, and good night, and please join us. Thank you.